The diplomatic station hung in the void between galaxies, a neutral meeting ground where species from across the known universe gathered to conduct business. Marcus Chen adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform, the crisp blue fabric bearing the simple Earth insignia that seemed almost laughably modest compared to the elaborate regalia worn by other species representatives. The Terran delegation was small, consisting of only 12 individuals representing humanity's first formal introduction to the Galactic Confederation. Marcus, despite being only 28, had been chosen as military liaison due to his exceptional combat record and surprising diplomatic skills developed during the war. With the Kythera pirates, the Central Hall buzzed with activity as dozens of alien species mingled, their forms ranging from the crystalline Zephyrians to the gaseous Nathali, who floated in containment suits. Marcus had studied the files extensively, but seeing them in person still filled him with wonder. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. "Stay close to the group," Ambassador Williams whispered to the Terran delegation. "Remember, we're here to observe and learn. Don't engage unless specifically addressed." Marcus nodded, though his attention was drawn to a disturbance across the hall. A group of tall, ethereal beings stood in heated discussion. Their skin seemed to absorb light, creating an almost shadow-like appearance while their eyes glowed with inner starlight. The Voidborn, he realized with a start, the most ancient and powerful species in the Confederation. At the center of the group stood a female who appeared younger than the others, though Marcus knew that appearances could be deceiving with alien species. Her movements were fluid and graceful, but there was steel in her bearing that spoke of authority beyond her apparent years. When she spoke, the others fell silent. Suddenly, her luminous gaze swept across the hall and locked onto Marcus. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Her eyes widened slightly, an expression that seemed almost human in its surprise. Without warning, she began walking directly toward the Terran delegation. "Ambassador," Marcus said quietly, "I think we're about to receive visitors." The Voidborn female approached with confident strides, her entourage following uncertainly behind. She was tall, nearly matching Marcus's height, which was unusual as most species were either much smaller or much larger than humans. Her features were elegant and sharp, with high cheekbones and a regal bearing that spoke of nobility. "Greetings," she said in perfect standard galactic, her voice carrying an otherworldly quality. "I am Zarathus of the Voidborn High Houses, heir to the Obsidian Throne. You are the Terrans, are you not?" Ambassador Williams stepped forward, clearly nervous. "Yes, Your Highness. I am Ambassador Williams, representing Earth and her colonies. This is our first formal gathering," but Zarathus barely glanced at the ambassador. Her attention remained fixed on Marcus, studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "And you are?" "Marcus Chen, military liaison," he replied, meeting her gaze steadily. Something about her demanded respect, but he refused to be intimidated. A slow smile spread across her features. "Marcus Chen," she repeated as if testing the sound of his name. "Tell me, warrior, what do you think of our gathering?" The question was clearly directed at him, ignoring protocol entirely. Ambassador Williams looked ready to intervene, but Marcus could sense that this moment was important in ways he didn't yet understand. "It's impressive," Marcus said honestly. "Seeing so many different forms of life working together gives me hope for humanity's future among the stars." "Hope," she mused. "An interesting word choice. Most species come here seeking advantage, power, or resources. You speak of hope." Before Marcus could respond, an older Voidborn male approached, his expression stern. "Princess, you should not be engaging with these newcomers so directly. The Council expects your presence." Zarathus turned to face him, and Marcus saw her demeanor shift subtly. Where before she had seemed curious and almost playful, now there was ice in her bearing. "Lord Vextar, I will join the Council when I choose to do so. I am not a child to be summoned. Your mother expects—" "My mother expects many things," Zarathus cut him off. "But I am heir to the throne, not her puppet." The tension in the air became palpable. Other conversations around them began to quiet as beings sensed the brewing conflict. Marcus found himself stepping slightly forward, though he wasn't sure why. Zarathus noticed the movement and something shifted in her expression. She looked at Marcus with what might have been approval. "Lord Vextar, allow me to introduce Marcus Chen of Terra. I find his perspective refreshing." The older Voidborn's eyes narrowed as he looked at Marcus for the first time. "A primitive species barely worthy of notice." Marcus felt anger flare but kept his expression neutral. Years of military discipline served him well. With respect, sir, we all started somewhere. Even the Voidborn must have taken their first steps into space once. The comment was borderline insolent, and Ambassador Williams looked ready to faint. But Zarathus laughed, a sound like distant thunder. Indeed we did, warrior, though few would dare remind us of such things. Lord Vextar's expression darkened further. Princess, surely you have more important matters to attend to than entertaining barbarians. This time Marcus couldn't keep quiet. Barbarians? We've traveled across the galaxy to participate in peaceful discourse. If that makes us barbarians, I wonder what that makes those who judge others before knowing them. The hall had gone completely silent now. Dozens of species watched the confrontation with keen interest. Ambassador Williams was making subtle hand signals for Marcus to stand down, but something about Zarathus's approving expression kept him rooted in place. You dare address your betters with such insolence? Lord Vextar snarled, his form seeming to darken and grow larger. I address anyone who insults my species with the truth. Marcus replied calmly. That's not insolence, it's dignity. For a moment it seemed violence might erupt. Then Zarathus placed herself between them, facing Lord Vextar. That is enough. The Terran has shown more honor in this exchange than some who claim ancient bloodlines. The insult was clear, and Lord Vextar's fury was evident. But he was facing the heir to the throne, and there were limits to how far he could push. This is not over, he said quietly, before turning and stalking away, the other Voidborn following. Zarathus turned back to Marcus, her eyes bright with something that might have been admiration. That was foolish, Marcus Chen. Perhaps, he admitted, but it was honest. Honesty, she said thoughtfully. Another quality in short supply at these gatherings. Tell me, would you walk with me? I find myself curious about Terra and her people. Ambassador Williams finally found his voice. Your Highness, surely there are proper protocols. Protocols, Zarathus said dismissively. I am the heir to the Obsidian throne. I make my own protocols. Marcus looked at his ambassador, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Whatever was happening here, it was clearly important to humanity's future. I would be honored, Marcus said simply. As they walked away from the stunned delegation, neither Marcus nor Zarathus noticed the interested gazes following them, or the subtle recording devices that had captured every word of their exchange. The ripples of this first meeting would spread across the galaxy in ways neither could imagine. The observation deck of the diplomatic station offered a breathtaking view of the cosmic void, where distant galaxies sparkled like scattered diamonds against the infinite darkness. Marcus stood beside Zarathus, both of them gazing out at the eternal expanse while the station's artificial atmosphere hummed quietly around them. Your people fascinate me, Zarathus said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. They had been walking and talking for over an hour, much to the obvious dismay of both their respective entourages. In all our records spanning millions of years, we have never encountered a species quite like humanity. Marcus turned to look at her profile, noting the way starlight seemed to reflect in her dark skin. What do you mean? We're just another young species trying to find our place in the galaxy. Just another species. She laughed softly. Marcus, do you know what the other races call you behind closed doors? I'm afraid to ask, he said with a wry smile. The Unbound, she said seriously. Every species we have encountered follows predictable patterns. They excel in certain areas while remaining limited in others. The Zephyrians are master engineers but poor warriors. The Kethari are brilliant strategists but lack emotional depth. The Multari are incredibly strong but slow to adapt. She paused, turning to face him fully. But humans, you defy categorization. You are warriors and poets, engineers and artists, logical and emotional, adaptive yet stubborn. You excel at everything while mastering nothing. Yet somehow that makes you more dangerous than any specialist species. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. Dangerous? Not in an evil way, she clarified quickly, but in an unpredictable way. When the Council first reviewed Earth's application for contact, there were heated debates about whether humanity should be allowed to join the galactic community at all. Why? Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Zarathus was quiet for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with some internal decision. Finally she spoke. Because of what happened to the last unbound species. The weight of her words settled between them like a physical presence. Marcus waited, sensing that she was revealing something significant, possibly forbidden. 60 million years ago, there was another species like yours. They called themselves the Ashanti. They too were adaptable, creative, unpredictable. They joined the galactic community much as you have, with hope and wonder. She moved closer to the viewing window, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent material. Within 10,000 years, they had become the dominant force in the galaxy. Not through conquest, but through innovation and alliance. Species that had remained static for millions of years suddenly began advancing at unprecedented rates under Ashanti influence. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. What happened to them? They vanished, Zarathus said simply. Every trace of them was erased from existence. Their worlds were destroyed so completely that no evidence of their civilization remained. Even their allies turned against them in the end. Who did it? That, she said, turning to face him with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of eons, is the question that has haunted the Voidborn for 60 million years. Because officially it never happened. The galactic records show no trace of the Ashanti. If not for Voidborn memory crystals that preserve truth beyond the reach of those who would alter history, even we might have forgotten. Marcus stared at her, trying to process the implications. You're saying there's a force in the galaxy capable of completely erasing a spacefaring civilization? I'm saying there are forces in this galaxy that view unbound species as existential threats, she replied carefully, and that humanity's arrival has stirred fears that have slumbered for millions of years. The observation deck suddenly felt much colder. Marcus thought about his species, about Earth and the colonies, about the billions of humans who had no idea they might be walking into a trap, millions of years in the making. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Zarathus moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the starlight patterns that seemed to flow beneath her dark skin. Because I believe humanity deserves a chance to survive what's coming. And because she hesitated, then seemed to steel herself. Because I have seen something in the memory crystals that the Council has not. What? The Ashanti weren't destroyed by an external force, she whispered, glancing around to ensure they were alone. They destroyed themselves. Or rather, they were manipulated into destroying themselves through civil war and paranoia. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. Someone turned them against each other. Someone very patient, very subtle, and very powerful, she confirmed. Someone who has had 60 million years to perfect their methods. And you think they're already working on humanity? I think, she said carefully, that the unusual hostility Lord Vextar showed toward you was not entirely his own idea. I think certain parties are already laying groundwork to isolate humanity from potential allies. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. This is insane. Why would anyone go to such lengths? Because unbound species represent change, Zarathus explained. And there are those in the galaxy who have benefited from the current order for so long that they will do anything to preserve it. They would rather rule over stagnation than risk losing control to progress. She moved even closer, and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and starlight. But there is hope, Marcus. The Ashanti were alone when the manipulation began. Humanity is not alone. What do you mean? I mean, she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, that the heir to the Obsidian throne finds herself unusually interested in ensuring humanity's survival. The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. She wasn't just sharing forbidden knowledge with him. She was offering an alliance that could reshape the balance of galactic power. Why? He asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Zarathus reached out and touched his hand, her skin cool but somehow energizing. Because in all my centuries of existence, I have never met anyone who could stand up to Voidborn nobility and speak of hope instead of fear. Because you looked at Lord Vextar and saw not a superior being to be appeased, but simply another person who needed to be reminded of basic decency. Marcus looked down at their joined hands, human and Voidborn, and felt the weight of history settling around them. Your people won't approve. My people, she said with a slight smile, have been ruling through fear and tradition for too long. Perhaps it's time for a different approach. And if this alliance costs you your throne? Her smile widened, and for a moment she looked almost human. Then perhaps the throne needs new management anyway. In the distance, Marcus could see other beings moving through the station's corridors, representatives of dozens of species going about their diplomatic business. unaware that the future of the galaxy might be shifting based on a conversation between a human warrior and a void-born princess. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked. "Now," Zarathus said, "we prepare for the storm that's coming, because those who destroyed the Ashanti won't make the mistake of underestimating an unbound species twice." The stars outside seemed to pulse with new meaning as Marcus realized that humanity's greatest test was not joining the galactic community, but surviving it long enough to change it from within. And perhaps if they were very careful and very lucky, they might have the most powerful ally in the galaxy standing beside them when the real war began. The summons came at dawn station time. Marcus was reviewing intelligence reports in his quarters when the door chimed with an urgent pattern. Ambassador Williams entered without waiting for permission, his face pale and drawn. "Marcus, we have a problem," Williams said, closing the door behind him. "The Void-born Empress has requested your immediate presence in the High Council chambers." Marcus set down his datapad carefully. "Just me?" "Just you," Williams confirmed grimly. The message was very specific. No other Terran representatives were invited. Marcus stood and reached for his formal uniform jacket. "Any idea what this is about?" Williams hesitated. "There are rumors. Apparently, Princess Zarathus spent considerable time with you yesterday, and certain parties weren't pleased about it." As Marcus adjusted his collar, he thought about his conversation with Zarathus on the observation deck, the forbidden knowledge she had shared, the alliance she had hinted at, the implications of everything she had told him about the Ashanti. If the Empress had learned about their discussion, this meeting could be very dangerous indeed. The journey to the High Council chambers took them through the most restricted sections of the diplomatic station. Marcus noticed that their escort consisted entirely of void-born guards, their dark forms moving with silent precision. No one spoke during the transit, but Marcus could feel the weight of hostile attention from every direction. The High Council chambers were a masterpiece of intimidation architecture. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, disappearing into darkness above while the walls seemed to absorb light itself. At the far end of the room, a throne of what appeared to be crystallized void matter dominated the space. Upon it sat the most terrifying being Marcus had ever encountered. Empress Veltar of the Void-born was ancient beyond human comprehension, her form radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy. Her skin was darker than her daughter's, seeming to draw in light from the surrounding area, while her eyes burned with the cold fire of dead stars. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of eons. "Approach, human." Marcus walked forward with steady steps, refusing to show the fear that was clawing at his chest. He stopped at what he judged to be a respectful distance and offered a formal bow. "Your Imperial Majesty." "You know who I am," the Empress said. It was not a question. "I do, Your Majesty." She leaned forward slightly, studying him with predatory intensity. "And do you know why you are here?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I assume it concerns my interactions with Princess Zarathus." A sound escaped the Empress that might have been laughter, but held no warmth. Interactions. Such a delicate word for what transpired yesterday. Around the edges of the chamber, Marcus became aware of other presences, shadowy figures that might have been advisors or guards, their forms indistinct in the darkness. He felt very alone and very exposed. "Tell me, human," the Empress continued, "what did my daughter share with you during your private conversation?" The question was a trap, and Marcus knew it. If he revealed what Zarathus had told him about the Ashanti, he would be admitting to receiving classified information. If he lied, the Empress would likely know. "We discussed humanity's place in the galactic community," Marcus said carefully. The princess expressed interest in Terran culture and perspectives. "Culture and perspectives," the Empress repeated, her tone growing colder. "How wonderfully vague. Perhaps I should be more specific in my questioning." She rose from her throne, and Marcus had to fight the urge to step backward. Standing, she was even more imposing, her presence filling the chamber like a gathering storm. "Did my daughter mention the memory crystals?" Marcus's heart sank. She knew everything, but he maintained his composure. "Your Majesty, if the princess shared information that was meant to be confidential, perhaps you should discuss that with her directly." "Oh, I intend to," the Empress said, and there was something in her voice that made Marcus fear for Zarathus's safety. "But first I want to understand what game you think you're playing, little human." "I'm not playing any game, Your Majesty." "No?" She began to circle him slowly like a predator sizing up prey. Then perhaps you can explain why my daughter, heir to the most powerful throne in the galaxy, seems to have developed such a sudden fascination with a primitive warrior from a species we've known about for less than a year. Marcus turned to keep facing her as she moved. I couldn't say, Your Majesty. You would have to ask the princess about her motivations. Her motivations, the Empress said, stopping directly in front of him, are irrelevant. What matters is that she is young, inexperienced, and apparently susceptible to manipulation by clever aliens. The insult stung, but Marcus kept his expression neutral. I have not attempted to manipulate anyone, Your Majesty. Haven't you? She moved closer, and Marcus could feel the temperature around him dropping. A charming young warrior, defending his species' honor against superior beings, speaking of hope and dignity. Very romantic. Very appealing to an idealistic, young princess who has spent too much time reading about noble causes. Marcus realized with growing alarm that the Empress was painting a picture of seduction and manipulation that could justify almost any response. Your Majesty, I assure you, you assure me of nothing, she cut him off. You are a representative of an unbound species, whether you know what that means or not. Your very existence is a threat to galactic stability. So she knew about the Ashanti classification. Marcus filed that information away while trying to figure out how to defuse the situation. I'm just a soldier, Your Majesty. I have no political ambitions beyond serving my species honorably. Just a soldier, she mused. Yet somehow you managed to intrigue the heir to the Obsidian throne within hours of meeting her. Just a soldier, yet you stand before me now without trembling, despite being in the presence of a being who could unmake your entire species with a thought. Marcus felt a chill at the casual threat. Courage is not the absence of fear, Your Majesty. It's acting despite fear. More noble words, the Empress said dismissively. Tell me, soldier, what would you do if I told you that your continued interaction with my daughter could result in consequences for all of humanity? The threat was clear now. Marcus weighed his options carefully. He could back down, apologize, promise to avoid Zarathus entirely. It would probably save his life and possibly protect humanity from immediate retaliation, but it would also abandon the only potential ally humanity had found in the galactic community. I would ask what my species has done to deserve such treatment, Marcus said quietly. The temperature in the chamber dropped further. What your species has done, the Empress said, her voice deadly calm, is exist. That is enough. Before Marcus could respond, another voice cut through the chamber's oppressive atmosphere. That is quite enough. Mother. Zarathus strode into the chamber, her own presence blazing with barely contained power. She was dressed in formal court attire, the dark material seeming to flow around her like liquid shadow, her eyes fixed on her mother with unmistakable defiance. Zarathus, the Empress said, not bothering to turn around. How convenient. We were just discussing your new pet. His name is Marcus, Zarathus said firmly, moving to stand beside him. And he is not my pet. He is my choice. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt the political weight of what she had just declared, and his heart raced as he realized the implications. Your choice? The Empress finally turned to face her daughter. You are the heir to the Obsidian throne. Your choices affect the entire Voidborn Empire. Yes, Zarathus said simply. They do. Mother and daughter faced each other across the chamber, and Marcus could feel the power crackling between them. Two of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, locked in a battle of wills that could reshape the political landscape of known space. You would risk everything, the Empress said slowly. For this human? Zarathus looked at Marcus, her expression softening for just a moment before hardening again as she faced her mother. I would risk everything for what he represents, she said. Change, growth. A future where power serves purpose instead of purpose serving power. The Empress was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Then perhaps it is time you learned the true cost of such choices. Guards escort the human to confinement. The princess and I have much to discuss. As Voidborn guards moved toward him, Marcus saw Zarathus's expression shift to one of alarm. Whatever she had expected from this confrontation, it wasn't imprisonment. Mother, no, she said, but the Empress held up a hand. The human will remain our guest until certain matters are resolved, the Empress announced. How comfortable his stay proves to be will depend entirely on your willingness to see reason, my daughter. Marcus allowed himself to be led away, but not before catching Zarathus's eye. In that brief moment, he saw determination blazing there, and something else that made his heart race despite the dire circumstances. The last thing he heard before the chamber doors closed was Zarathus's voice, clear and defiant. "This is not over, Mother." The Voidborn holding cell was a study in psychological warfare. The walls seemed to absorb light, creating an environment of perpetual twilight that made it impossible to judge the passage of time. The only illumination came from strips of cold light that pulsed in irregular patterns, designed to prevent the occupant from falling into any natural rhythm. Marcus had been imprisoned for what felt like days, though his internal chronometer suggested it had only been 18 hours. The cell was comfortable enough with basic amenities and food that appeared at regular intervals, but the isolation was wearing on him. He had no contact with the outside world, no way of knowing what was happening between Zarathus and her mother. He was performing his third set of exercises for the day when the door suddenly chimed. Marcus straightened, expecting to see guards or perhaps an interrogator. Instead, Lord Vextar entered alone, his expression unreadable. "Human," Vextar said, the word carrying his usual disdain. "Lord Vextar," Marcus replied neutrally. "I wasn't expecting visitors." "I imagine you weren't," Vextar said, moving further into the cell. "Tell me, how are you finding Voidborn hospitality?" Marcus studied the older being carefully. There was something different about Vextar's demeanor, a tension that hadn't been there during their first encounter. "It's been educational." "Educational," Vextar repeated with what might have been amusement. "How delightfully diplomatic. Though I suppose diplomacy is pointless now." "What do you mean?" Vextar moved closer, and Marcus noticed that the Lord's usual retinue of guards was absent. "I mean that events have progressed beyond the point where careful words and political maneuvering can resolve them." Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. "What events?" "The princess has made her position clear," Vextar said. "She has formally declared her intention to bond with you despite her mother's explicit prohibition." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "She did what?" "A life bond declaration," Vextar explained, his tone almost clinical. "Among the Voidborn, it is the most serious commitment possible. More binding than marriage, more permanent than law. When a Voidborn declares life bond, they are stating that their very existence is tied to another being." Marcus sat down heavily on the cell's simple chair. "I never asked her to do that." "Asked or not, she has done it," Vextar said. "And the consequences are significant." "What kind of consequences?" Vextar was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried an emotion Marcus couldn't identify. "The Empress has given her daughter an ultimatum. Renounce the life bond declaration and accept a traditional arranged marriage to solidify Voidborn power, or face exile from the Empire." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "And if she chooses exile?" "Then she loses everything," Vextar said simply. "Her title, her inheritance, her place in Voidborn society. She would become nothing more than a refugee, dependent on the charity of other species." The magnitude of what Zarathus was risking hit Marcus full force. She was willing to give up an empire for him. A human she had known for less than a week. The weight of that responsibility was crushing. "There's more," Vextar continued. "The Empress has also made it clear that humanity's status in the galactic community depends on the princess's decision. Choose the human, and Terra loses all consideration for Confederation membership." Marcus looked up at Vextar sharply. "You're threatening my entire species to force her compliance?" "I am threatening nothing," Vextar said. "I am merely informing you of the Empress's position." Marcus stood and began pacing the small cell. "So what are you here for, to gloat? To watch me realize how impossible the situation has become?" "I am here," Vextar said carefully, "because despite my personal feelings about your species, I believe the princess deserves better than to be used as a political pawn." Marcus stopped pacing and stared at him. "What?" "You seem surprised," Vextar observed. "Did you think all of the princess's supporters had abandoned her?" "You're her supporter?" Marcus asked incredulously. "You've done nothing but show hostility toward both her and me." "Public positions and private convictions are not always the same thing," Vextar said with something that might have been a smile. "The princess is strong-willed, intelligent, and capable of leading the Voidborn into a new age. But she is also young and inexperienced in the ways of court politics. Marcus was beginning to understand. You were testing me. I was gauging whether you were worthy of the risks she was taking, Vextar confirmed. Whether you would crumble under pressure or stand firm in your convictions. And your conclusion? My conclusion, Vextar said, is that you are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. Possibly both. Despite the dire circumstances, Marcus found himself almost smiling. In my experience, the two often go together. Indeed, Vextar agreed. Which brings me to why I am really here. The Lord moved closer to the cell's wall panel and began manipulating controls that Marcus hadn't even noticed. The princess has developed a plan to resolve this situation, but it requires your cooperation. What kind of plan? The kind that will either save both your species and secure the princess's future, or result in all of us being executed for treason, Vextar said matter-of-factly. Marcus felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. I'm listening. There is an ancient Voidborn law, Vextar explained as he worked. The right of challenge. It allows any member of the royal family to demand trial by combat to resolve matters of succession or honor. Trial by combat? Marcus asked. Against who? Against a champion chosen by the opposing party, Vextar said. In this case, the Empress would choose a warrior to represent her position, and the princess would choose one to represent hers. Marcus was beginning to see where this was heading. She wants me to be her champion. It is the only way to resolve the situation without either of you backing down, Vextar confirmed. If you win, the life bond declaration stands and humanity gains a powerful ally. If I lose, I'm dead and humanity gets nothing, Marcus finished. Precisely. Marcus considered the proposal. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it offered something that no amount of political maneuvering could. A clear path forward. Who would I be fighting? That has not yet been revealed, Vextar said. But given the stakes, expect the Empress to choose someone formidable. The wall panel beeped softly and Vextar stepped back. The security locks have been temporarily disabled. You have a narrow window to reach the princess's quarters without being detected. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. Why are you helping us? Vextar was quiet for a moment. Because I have served the Voidborn Empire for over 3 millennia, and I have watched it grow stagnant and insular. The princess represents hope for change, even if that change comes through alliance with a species I do not fully understand. And if this plan fails, then we will face the consequences together, Vextar said simply. But at least we will have tried to build something better than what we inherited. Marcus nodded and moved toward the door. As it slid open silently, Vextar called out softly, Human. Marcus turned back. Do not make me regret this decision. I won't, Marcus promised, and stepped into the darkened corridor. The journey to Zarathus's quarters was a nightmare of stealth and timing. Marcus had to avoid multiple patrols while navigating corridors he had never seen before, relying on the basic station schematics he had memorized during his first day aboard. The Voidborn section of the station was a maze of organic curves and flowing architecture that seemed to shift subtly. In his peripheral vision, twice he had to press himself into alcoves as guards passed, their dark forms moving with predatory grace through the dimly lit passages. When he finally reached the ornate door marked with Voidborn royal symbols, Marcus hesitated. Everything he was about to do would be considered treason by Voidborn law. Once he stepped through that door, there would be no going back. He pressed the entry chime. The door slid open immediately, as if Zarathus had been waiting just inside. She pulled him quickly into her quarters, sealing the door behind them with what looked like additional security protocols. Marcus, she breathed, and he could see relief and something deeper in her luminous eyes. Lord Vextar said he would try to get you out, but I wasn't certain he would succeed. He succeeded, Marcus said, looking around her quarters. The space was larger than his cell, but still managed to feel intimate, with flowing furniture that seemed to grow from the floor itself and walls that displayed slowly shifting patterns like aurora. Though he also explained the situation to me, Zarathus's expression grew serious. Then you know what I've done. I know you've declared life bond, Marcus said carefully, but I need to understand what that really means for your people. She moved to a seating area that overlooked a viewing portal showing the stars beyond the station. Among the Voidborn, life bond is sacred. It means that two beings have found in each other something essential to their existence. To declare life bond is to say that life without the other would be meaningless. Marcus felt the weight of her words. Zarathis, we've known each other for 3 days. Time is irrelevant, she said, turning to face him. I have lived for over 2 centuries, Marcus. I have met thousands of beings from hundreds of species. I have never encountered anyone who challenged me to think differently about everything I believed. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with tension as representatives from across the galaxy filled the massive amphitheater. Marcus had never seen so many different species in one place, their varied forms creating a tapestry of evolution that would have fascinated him under different circumstances. Today, however, he could focus on nothing but the looming confrontation. He sat in the designated area for the Terran delegation, though Ambassador Williams had barely spoken to him since learning about the previous night's events. The other human diplomats cast nervous glances in his direction, clearly uncomfortable with the attention their delegation was receiving. At the center of the hall, the Voidborn royal platform dominated the space. Empress Veltar sat upon her crystalline throne, her presence seeming to absorb light from the surrounding area. Beside her, on a smaller but equally elegant chair, sat Zarathis. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the tension in her posture. This is insane, Ambassador Williams whispered to Marcus. Do you have any idea what you're risking? Not just for yourself, but for all of humanity? I'm aware of the stakes, Marcus replied quietly, not taking his eyes off Zarathis. Are you? Williams pressed. Because from where I sit, it looks like you're gambling our entire species' future on some romantic notion. Marcus finally looked at the ambassador. It's not romantic, Ambassador. It's survival. With or without this challenge, forces are already working against humanity. At least this way, we have a chance to gain a powerful ally. Before Williams could respond, a deep tone resonated through the hall, calling the assembly to order. Empress Veltar rose from her throne, and the entire amphitheater fell silent. Representatives of the Galactic Confederation, the Empress began, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast space. We gather today to address a matter of unprecedented significance. Marcus felt every eye in the hall turning toward him. Representatives from dozens of species craned their necks to get a better look at the human who had somehow become the center of galactic attention. My daughter, Princess Zarathis, heir to the Obsidian Throne, has made a declaration that challenges the very foundations of Voidborn tradition, the Empress continued. She has declared life bond with a member of the Terran species. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Marcus could see shock, fascination, and in some cases, disgust on the various alien faces turned toward him. As Empress of the Voidborn, Veltar said, her voice growing colder, I find this declaration unacceptable. The heir to our throne cannot bind herself to a primitive species barely worthy of galactic recognition. The insult stung, but Marcus kept his expression neutral. This was political theater as much as personal drama. However, the Empress continued, my daughter has invoked her right under ancient law to defend her position through trial by combat. Zarathis stood gracefully and moved to the center of the platform. When she spoke, her voice carried the same authority as her mother's, but with an underlying warmth that the Empress lacked. Members of the Confederation, Zarathis said, I stand before you today not just as a princess of the Voidborn, but as a being who has found something worth fighting for. The life bond I have declared is not mere infatuation or political maneuvering. It is recognition of a connection that transcends species boundaries. She turned slightly, and her gaze found Marcus across the vast hall. I have chosen Marcus Chen of Terra as my life bond because he represents something that our galaxy desperately needs. The courage to change, to grow, to become something better than what we have always been. A new murmur ran through the assembly, this one more thoughtful than shocked. Marcus could see that some of the delegates were actually considering her words rather than simply reacting to them. I therefore formally challenge my mother's prohibition, Zarathis declared. Let the ancient laws decide whether love and hope are stronger than fear and tradition. The Empress stood again, her expression unmistakably hostile. The challenge is acknowledged. I will choose my champion, and the combat will commence within the hour. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Within the hour? He had expected more time to prepare, to strategize, to at least learn who he would be fighting. I choose, the Empress announced. Kethamor the Destroyer, champion of the Multari Empire. A collective gasp ran through the assembly. Marcus didn't recognize the name, but the reaction from the other delegates told him everything he needed to know. This was not going to be an easy fight. From the Moltari section of the assembly, a figure began to rise. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice as he got his first look at his opponent. Kethmore was massive, easily 9 feet tall and proportionally broad. His skin looked like living stone, gray and pitted with what might have been battle scars or natural texture. 4 arms extended from his torso, each ending in hands that could easily crush a human skull. But it was Kethmore's eyes that truly frightened Marcus. They were intelligent, calculating, and completely without mercy. This was a being who had made a profession of killing, and who was very good at his job. "The combat will take place in the station's arena," the Empress announced. "All weapons and combat styles are permitted. The fight continues until one champion yields or dies." Marcus swallowed hard. Death matches were apparently still legal under galactic law when it came to matters of honor and succession. "Champion Kethmore," the Empress called out, "do you accept this sacred duty?" The Moltari's response was a roar that shook the assembly hall. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. "I accept, Empress. The human will not survive the first exchange." The casual confidence with which he made the pronouncement sent chills through Marcus. This wasn't bravado. It was professional assessment. "Marcus Chen of Terra," the Empress called out, her voice dripping with false courtesy. "Do you accept the role of champion for my daughter's cause?" Marcus stood slowly, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes upon him. In this moment he represented not just himself or even Zarathus, but the entirety of human potential. The fate of his species might well rest on the outcome of the next hour. "I accept," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall despite his racing heart. "Then let the champions prepare," the Empress declared. "The trial by combat will commence when the station's chronometer reaches the next hour mark." As the assembly began to disperse toward the arena levels, Marcus found himself surrounded by the Terran delegation. Ambassador Williams looked pale and shaken, while the other diplomats seemed to be in various stages of shock or panic. "Marcus," Williams said urgently, "there's still time to withdraw. We can claim diplomatic immunity, file protests with the Confederation Council." "No," Marcus said firmly. "This is the path forward. For humanity and for Zarathus." As if summoned by her name, the princess appeared at his side, having somehow made her way through the crowd of delegates. Up close, Marcus could see the worry in her luminous eyes, though she was doing her best to project confidence. "Are you ready for this?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked across the hall to where Kethmore was surrounded by other Moltari, their stone-like forms creating an intimidating wall of alien strength. The destroyer was calmly examining various weapons that his supporters had brought, testing their balance and edge with the casual familiarity of a craftsman selecting tools. "Honestly," Marcus said, "I'm terrified. But I'm also ready." Zarathus reached out and touched his hand, the contact sending that familiar tingle of energy through his skin. "Remember," she said softly, "this isn't just about strength. Combat is as much about intelligence and adaptability as it is about raw power." "Human strengths," Marcus realized. "Exactly," she confirmed. "Use what makes your species unique. Don't try to fight like a Moltari. Fight like a human." As they made their way toward the arena levels, Marcus felt a strange calm settling over him. The fear was still there, but it was being pushed aside by something deeper: purpose. He was about to fight not just for his own life or even for love, but for the future of human civilization among the stars. The arena awaited, and with it, the most important battle of his life. The arena was a perfect circle carved from what appeared to be a single piece of black stone, 50 meters in diameter, with walls that rose 20 meters to viewing galleries packed with representatives from across the galaxy. The floor was smooth but not slippery, designed to provide sure footing without giving either combatant an advantage. Marcus stood in one of the preparation alcoves, checking his equipment one final time. He had chosen light armor that offered protection without restricting movement, and carried 2 weapons: a plasma sword that hummed with contained energy, and a projectile weapon that fired smart rounds capable of adapting to different target types. Across the arena, Kethmore was making his own preparations. The Moltari had eschewed armor entirely, apparently confident that his stone-like skin would provide sufficient protection. In his forehands he carried an assortment of weapons that looked more like siege equipment than personal armament. A massive warhammer, a blade that seemed to be carved from a single crystal, and two smaller weapons that Marcus couldn't identify from this distance. "You don't have to do this," Ambassador Williams said for the 10th time. He had followed Marcus down to the preparation area, despite having no official role in the proceedings. "Even now we could find another way." "There is no other way," Marcus replied, adjusting the fit of his armor. "And even if there was, I wouldn't take it." "Why?" Williams asked desperately. "Why are you willing to die for someone you barely know?" Marcus paused in his preparations and looked at the ambassador. "Because she's willing to give up everything for someone she barely knows. Because sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones that seem impossible. And because humanity needs allies out here, Williams. Real allies, not just trading partners or political conveniences." Before Williams could respond, a tone sounded throughout the arena, indicating that the combat was about to begin. Marcus took a deep breath and walked toward the arena floor, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. The viewing galleries were packed beyond capacity. Marcus could see the void-born royal box where Empress Veltar sat like a statue of judgment, her expression unreadable. Beside her, Zarathus leaned forward intently, her luminous eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that he could feel even at this distance. In the center of the arena stood a figure Marcus didn't recognize, a tall, crystalline being who appeared to be serving as referee. When it spoke, its voice rang like struck crystal. "Champions," the referee announced, "you fight today under the ancient laws of trial by combat. The rules are simple. The combat continues until one yields, is incapacitated, or dies. No outside interference will be tolerated. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate disqualification and dishonor for the offending party." Marcus and Kethmore approached the center of the arena from opposite sides. Up close, the Moltari was even more intimidating. His stone-gray skin was covered in intricate scars that might have been natural markings or battle wounds, and his forearms moved with surprising grace for their size. When he looked at Marcus, there was no hostility in his eyes, only professional assessment. "Human," Kethmore said, his voice like grinding boulders. "You show courage in facing me. I will make your death quick." "I appreciate the sentiment," Marcus replied, "but I'm planning to disappoint you." Something that might have been amusement flickered in the Moltari's eyes. "We shall see." The referee raised one crystalline arm. "Champions, prepare for combat." Marcus shifted into a ready stance, his plasma sword humming to life while his other hand rested on his projectile weapon. Across from him, Kethmore hefted his massive warhammer with one arm while gripping his crystal blade with another, the remaining two hands holding the smaller weapons in reserve. "Begin," the referee announced and immediately teleported away from the combat zone. Kethmore attacked with shocking speed for such a large being. The warhammer came down in a devastating arc that would have pulverized Marcus if it had connected. Instead, the human rolled aside, feeling the wind from the massive weapon's passage. The hammer struck the arena floor with enough force to crack the stone. Marcus came up from his roll and immediately fired 3 smart rounds from his projectile weapon. The bullets adapted to their target, shifting to armor-piercing configuration as they flew. 2 struck Kethmore's torso, penetrating his stone-like skin and drawing dark ichor. The third hit his shoulder, causing the Moltari to stagger slightly. But if Marcus had hoped the wounds would slow his opponent, he was quickly disappointed. Kethmore roared with what sounded like approval rather than pain, and launched into a flurry of attacks with all 4 arms. The crystal blade whistled through the air where Marcus's head had been a split second before. While the warhammer cratered the floor inches from his feet, Marcus realized immediately that trying to match Kethmore's strength would be suicide. Instead, he focused on what Zarathus had told him: fight like a human. He used his speed and agility to stay mobile, never remaining in one place long enough for the Moltari to land a solid hit. The smaller weapons in Kethmore's secondary hands proved to be energy projectors of some kind, sending bolts of crackling force that scorched the arena floor where Marcus had been standing. The human ducked, weaved, and rolled, using every trick of evasion he had learned in years of combat training. But defense alone wouldn't win this fight. Marcus needed to find a way to exploit his opponent's weaknesses, if any existed. The opportunity came when Kethmore overextended during a particularly aggressive attack sequence. The Moltari had committed to a devastating overhead strike with his warhammer, leaving his lower torso briefly exposed. Marcus darted in close, his plasma sword carving a deep line across Kethmore's abdomen. The Moltari's roar of pain and rage shook the arena. He swung wildly with all four arms, forcing Marcus to leap backwards to avoid being pulverized. Dark ichor flowed from the wound, and for the first time, Marcus saw uncertainty in his opponent's eyes. The crowd in the viewing galleries was on its feet, representatives from dozens of species shouting encouragement or dismay, depending on their political affiliations. In the royal box, Marcus caught a glimpse of Zarathis, her hands pressed to the barrier as she watched the combat with fierce intensity. Kethmore adjusted his strategy, becoming more defensive and methodical. He used his reach advantage to keep Marcus at a distance, forcing the human to work for every opening. The Moltari's wounds were slowing him down, but his experience and skill were keeping him competitive. The fight settled into a deadly dance, Marcus darting in to strike when opportunities presented themselves, Kethmore using his superior reach and power to control the pace. Both combatants were bleeding now, Marcus from several glancing blows that had penetrated his armor, Kethmore from the accumulated damage of the human's hit-and-run tactics. Then Kethmore made a mistake that Marcus had been waiting for. In his eagerness to land a finishing blow, the Moltari threw his crystal blade like a spear, aiming for Marcus's center mass. The human dropped flat, feeling the weapon pass over him with millimeters to spare. With his opponent suddenly down to 3 weapons, Marcus saw his chance. He charged forward, weaving between Kethmore's remaining arms to get inside the Moltari's guard. His plasma sword found the joint where Kethmore's lower right arm connected to his torso, and the limb fell away in a spray of dark ichor. Kethmore's scream of agony echoed through the arena. Down to 3 arms and weakening from blood loss, he made one final desperate assault. The warhammer came down with all his remaining strength, aimed directly at Marcus's head. But the human was no longer where the Moltari expected him to be. Marcus had anticipated the attack and rolled aside at the last possible moment. As Kethmore fought to recover his balance, Marcus struck with precision and finality. The plasma sword found the gap between the Moltari's ribs, piercing directly to his primary heart. Kethmore stood frozen for a moment, his remaining weapons falling from nerveless fingers. Then slowly the massive warrior fell to his knees. "I yield," Kethmore gasped, dark ichor frothing from his lips. "The human fights with honor." Marcus deactivated his plasma sword and stepped back, breathing heavily. Around them, the arena had fallen completely silent. Then from the viewing galleries a sound began to build. Applause. Not from every species, but from enough to make it clear that Marcus's victory had been both impressive and legitimate. In the royal box, Empress Veltar sat like a statue, her expression unreadable. But beside her, Zarathis was on her feet, her face radiant with pride and joy. The crystalline referee materialized in the center of the arena. "The trial by combat is concluded," it announced. "Marcus Chen of Terra stands victorious. By ancient law, the life bond declaration of Princess Zarathis is validated and binding." As medical teams rushed to attend to Kethmore, Marcus looked up at the royal box. Empress Veltar slowly stood, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the now silent arena. "The law has been satisfied," she announced. "The life bond stands." The words were correct, but Marcus could hear the promise of future conflict in her tone. This battle was won, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy was far from over. 6 months after the trial by combat, the diplomatic station had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. The site of the first formal alliance ceremony between the Voidborn Empire and the Terran Federation. The same halls that had witnessed Marcus's desperate fight for survival now hosted delegations from across the galaxy, many of whom had come to witness what political analysts were calling the most significant shift in galactic power dynamics in millions of years. Marcus stood on the observation deck where he and Zarathis had first shared forbidden knowledge, but now he wore the formal regalia of a Terran ambassador extraordinary. The position had been created specifically for him, acknowledging both his unique role in the alliance and the need for someone who could navigate the complex relationship between human and void-born interests. The view outside the station had changed as well. Where once there had been only the diplomatic platform, now a small fleet hung in formation. Terran vessels with their practical, Angular designs alongside void-born ships that seemed to bend light around their dark hulls. The sight never failed to fill Marcus with a sense of wonder at how far they had all come. "You look thoughtful," Zarathis said, approaching from behind. She now wore a modified version of traditional void-born royal attire. The flowing dark material adapted to include subtle earth-blue accents that symbolized her dual loyalty to both species. "I was thinking about that first conversation we had here," Marcus replied, turning to face her. "When you told me about the Ashanti, it feels like a lifetime ago." "In many ways it was," she agreed, moving to stand beside him at the viewing portal. "We're different people than we were 6 months ago." That was certainly true. The months following the trial by combat had been a whirlwind of political maneuvering, cultural exchange, and careful relationship building. Empress Veltar had honored the ancient laws by recognizing the life bond, but she had made it clear that acceptance and approval were two different things. The real change had come gradually, as the practical benefits of the human void-born alliance became apparent to both species. Terran adaptability and innovation had proven to complement void-born power and ancient wisdom in ways that surprised even the most optimistic projections. Joint research projects had yielded technological advances that neither species could have achieved alone, while combined military exercises had demonstrated tactical possibilities that were reshaping strategic thinking across the galaxy. "Any word from the advance teams?" Marcus asked. "The Kepler colony expedition has established their first permanent base," Zarathis reported, "and the Voidborn Engineering Corps has completed the prototype Stargate in the Centauri system. We're ahead of schedule on both projects." The joint colonization and infrastructure programs were perhaps the most visible signs of the Alliance's success. Human colonists, protected by Voidborn Void Shield technology and supported by their advanced logistics capabilities, were establishing footholds in star systems that would have been impossible to reach with Earth technology alone. In return, human engineering and terraforming expertise was allowing the Voidborn to expand into types of worlds they had never considered habitable. "And the intelligence reports?" Marcus asked, though he was almost afraid to hear the answer. Zarathis's expression grew more serious. "The manipulation campaigns against humanity have intensified. Our intelligence services have identified at least 12 different operations designed to create internal conflicts within the Terran Federation. This was the darker side of their success. Just as Zarathis had predicted, the forces that had destroyed the Ashanti were actively working against humanity. But now, with void-born resources and knowledge supporting Earth's counterintelligence efforts, these campaigns were being identified and neutralized before they could take hold. "Any progress on identifying the source?" Marcus asked. "Some," Zarathis said carefully. "We've traced several of the operations to shell organizations funded by the Zephyrian hegemony, but we believe they're acting as proxies for someone else." The investigation into the anti-human campaigns had become one of their highest priorities. Understanding who was behind the manipulation efforts was crucial, not just for protecting humanity, but for preventing future attempts against other unbound species that might emerge. "Speaking of which," Zarathis continued, "there's something you should know before the ceremony begins." Marcus turned to face her fully, recognizing the tone that meant important news. "What is it?" 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something unprecedented," she said. "A signal from beyond the galactic rim. The pattern analysis suggests it's artificial in origin." Marcus felt a chill of anticipation. "Another species?" "Possibly," Zarathis confirmed. "But preliminary analysis of the signal structure suggests cognitive patterns similar to those displayed by unbound species." The implications were staggering. If there was another unbound species out there, possibly one that had survived whatever had destroyed the Ashanti, it could change everything about their understanding of the galaxy's hidden history. "How long until we can mount an expedition to investigate?" Marcus asked. "The Joint Science Council estimates 18 months to prepare a properly equipped exploration fleet," Zarathis replied. "But that assumes the continued stability of our alliance, which brought them back to the immediate challenge. The ceremony about to begin would formally ratify the alliance between their species, but it would also inevitably provoke reactions from those who opposed the new balance of power. They had already survived one assassination attempt and several diplomatic sabotage efforts. "Are you ready for this?" Zarathis asked, echoing the question she had posed before his trial by combat. Are any of us? Marcus replied. We're about to announce to the galaxy that humanity and the Voidborn Empire are permanently linked. That's going to terrify a lot of beings who prefer the old order. Let them be terrified, Zarathis said with a smile that held both warmth and steel. Fear of change is what led to the Ashanti's destruction. If we're going to break that cycle, we need to be strong enough to protect ourselves while remaining open enough to grow. A soft chime indicated that the ceremony was about to begin. Through the observation deck's viewing portal, Marcus could see the formal procession beginning to form in the main assembly hall. Representatives from dozens of species were taking their positions, while media drones from across the galaxy prepared to broadcast the historic event. Marcus, Zarathis said softly, taking his hand in hers. Whatever happens after today, I want you to know that I have never regretted the choice I made. Even giving up your original throne for an uncertain future? Marcus asked. I didn't give up a throne, she corrected with a smile. I gained a partner in building something better than any throne could offer. The formal regalia she now wore included a new symbol. A crown that incorporated design elements from both Voidborn tradition and human culture. It had been crafted specifically for her new role as the first Empress of the United Territories, the joint human-Voidborn colonies that were being established throughout their shared space. And I've never regretted standing up to Lord Vexitar that first day, Marcus replied. Even though I had no idea it would lead to all this. Especially because you had no idea, Zarathis said. That's what made it genuine. They made their way to the assembly hall where the ceremony that would reshape galactic politics was about to begin. As they walked through corridors now bustling with beings from across the galaxy, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. It had started with a simple human impulse. The refusal to let someone insult his species without challenge. That moment of defiance had led to forbidden knowledge, to love, to trial by combat, and ultimately to an alliance that might prevent the destruction of his entire civilization. The assembly hall was packed beyond capacity, with every major species in the galaxy represented. At the center of the hall, 2 thrones had been placed side by side, one carved from Voidborn void crystal, the other crafted from earth metals and bearing the simple elegance of human design. Empress Veltar stood at the podium, her presence still commanding despite the changed circumstances. The months since the trial by combat had forced her to reassess many of her long-held beliefs, and while she had never warmed to Marcus personally, she had come to respect the practical benefits of the alliance he had made possible. Members of the Galactic Confederation, the Empress began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. Today we witness the formalization of an alliance that has already begun to reshape our understanding of what is possible when different species unite in common purpose. Marcus and Zarathis took their places on the thrones, the symbolism clear to every being in the assembly. This was not a simple diplomatic agreement or trade partnership. This was the birth of something entirely new in galactic politics. The Terran Federation and the Voidborn Empire, Veltar continued, have demonstrated that the barriers between species need not be permanent, that cooperation can yield benefits that isolation never could. As the formal pronouncements continued, Marcus noticed movement in the viewing galleries. Lord Vixtar,